Alrighty. Well, we are a little bit afternoon and we have a strong number of attendees already with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us. This month's Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration Series is presenting AICP Ethics Cases of the Year with Ethics Jeopardy. So you'll have the chance to test your knowledge a little bit this afternoon. We have a great group of folks with us, and Scott with the Pennsylvania chapter will be further introducing our speakers, but I just wanted to run through some quick housekeeping items. The CM information for this webinar is listed here, but I'll also put it in the chat in just a moment. In the chat, I will also put a link to the MAPC website page and the MAPC YouTube page. You may have been notified on your screens a moment ago that this webinar is being recorded. So the recording of that will be posted in the coming days, and you can find all previously recorded webinars in the series there as well. We really do encourage questions. Put your questions in the Q&A. There will also be opportunities to put some items in the chat. All features will remain open. We'll also be having some polling questions, so you'll see those populate on your screens. And if during the formal Q&A you'd prefer to ask your question, or excuse me, if you'd prefer to ask any question out loud, feel free to use the raise hand feature. But this webinar will have a lot of Jeopardy questions, so we'll sort of be rolling right through. I'm trying to think any other information that I am omitting. Oh, just a quick note about the MAPC series. We will not be having a webinar in December just due to the holidays and some scheduling conflicts, but starting in the new year, we'll be shifting to a recurring schedule of every second Thursday. So I will share all the information I mentioned in the chat in just a moment with the helpful links and the link to our YouTube page. But other than that, I will hand it over to Scott. And thank you to everybody for being with us this afternoon.
All right, great. Thanks for that introduction. And I've just got to find the button to share, which I seem to have lost momentarily. Here we go. All right. All right, great. Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Duncanson. I'm with the Pennsylvania chapter of the APA. I'm a part of the Professional Development Committee that helps with a lot of professional development training. We're part of the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration, which was established in 2020 with 6 other APA chapters, along with some other planning partners, to provide free webinars on topics relevant to planners in the Mid-Atlantic region. We've had over 40 webinars to date over the last 5 years. And as Jillian mentioned, coming up starting the second Thursday in January, the overarching theme for 2026 is going to be energy and planning, or I think someone else has dubbed it big energy. So look for some reminders coming up about that in the near future. Okay, let's see. Got these to advance. Okay, so we're going to start with a polling question. We're going to do a couple polling questions at the beginning, and then we're going to switch to people using the chat to answer questions. So Jillian, do you have the first polling question, which is, where are you tuning in from today? Are the 6 states that are part of the Mid-Atlantic region, or maybe you're from some other state, or maybe we've even had some international folks chime in. So why don't you go ahead and plug that in? We'll give it a few seconds, and then we will close out the poll, Jillian, when you think we've got enough people that have answered.
Alrighty, we're at about 80% participation rate, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
Okay, so looks like we've got a healthy contingent from Virginia, as well as from Maryland. And boy, we've got a bunch of folks from other states that have joined us, so that's great. Ethics is not relevant just to the Mid-Atlantic states. It's relevant across the country planning ethics. So that's great that we have folks tuning in from elsewhere. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the presenters today, we've got an all-star cast of planning ethics aficionados here. We've got Ralph Wilmer, who's the AICP Ethics Officer. And then we've got 3 members of the AICP Ethics Committee, Carol Barrett, Kim Mickelson, and Arlova Vaughn, who's also based in the Mid-Atlantic out of Arlington County, Virginia. I'm going to serve as the host, and then I'm going to sit back and run the slideshow and let the planning experts here, ethics experts, run with the rest of the presentation. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Mickelson. Kim's going to go through a couple more slides, including one more polling question, and get us kicked off.
Once I remember where the mute button is. So today we're going to start with, our agenda is going to walk through refresher on general planning ethics issues, the overview of what Ralph has seen and what the ethics committee sees on our 2024 case and inquiry activity numbers. We're going to focus and really highlight the issue of equity and the aspirational principles in practice. And then we're going to go through 4 ethical scenarios, which are all real cases that have gone through the ethics officer and in some cases the ethics committee. We're going to conclude, time allowing, with some fun ethics Jeopardy, including final Jeopardy, and hopefully allow a little bit of time for Q&A. Next slide should show the next question, I think. Yep. So we're going to ask you all where you work: public, private sector, in education, student, federal government, nonprofit, etc. So if you can take a second, and Jillian will close that out when we've got a fair amount of answers on this one. Okay. Mostly local government. That's where I've spent my career too. Good. All right. Looks like mostly local government and private consulting side. I see a couple of other answers in the chat. Permitting with a solar developer. Okay. Some sustainability going here. Okay, next slide. So you all know planning is a team sport. It's not one that probably any one of us ever do alone. It's always got the team sport or team player function, which makes it a lot more, in my view at least. I'm a lawyer and working in that profession. We get to do a lot of stuff individually. So that's why I love planning. Ahead. And as always, and maybe good coming from the lawyer, we always have a disclaimer. This is providing you general information education regarding the AICP Code of Ethics. Ethical scenarios are important to illustrate the application of the code's provisions. But if you have questions regarding a situation in your own practice, please seek informal advice from Ralph Wilmer, who's here. And if I'm not mistaken, Ralph, do you carry us on from here?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay, on the ethics committee, this is one of our favorite items, and all of you can download this from the planning.org/ethics page. But it's a code of ethics and professional conduct that we encourage all AICP members to print out and display in their office so that people coming in to meet with you, whether it's your elected and appointed officials or members of the public, will see this and get some of the principles and rules of conduct that that AICP licensed professionals adhere to. So please look that up. I have that in my office.
Okay, and then I think we're going over to Carol. I think Carol's up next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm currently in Texas, but I have lived and worked in both Maryland and North Carolina. So my heart has ties to the Mid-Atlantic region. The next few slides are to orient you to the content of the Code of Ethics. Has 5 sections, the aspirational principles and rules of conduct. And I guarantee you, if you are struggling with interpretation of a rule of conduct, it is easier to figure out best behavior if you do that in the context of the aspirational principles. Then there are also advisory opinions, the process for complaints of misconduct, and then the various forms of discipline of members, which can include your losing your membership in AICP. Next slide.
Yeah, real quick, before we jump off this slide, when we get to the ethics Jeopardy portion, you're going to want to go to www.planning.org/ethics, even /ethics code. It's going to be an open book Jeopardy session. So you might want to get that link warmed up so that you're ready for ethics Jeopardy when we're done with the cases of the year. Okay, next slide.
Right now, there is a ton of noise in the atmosphere about what is the role of government and who are we serving in our day-to-day life. I like this component of the code because it answers very basically the question of who we are and why we do what we do as planners. There are 5 major sections in the aspirational principles. As always, for planners, both in the public sector and the private sector, our job is to serve the public interest, to do so with integrity, to address issues of equity, economic, social, and racial, to safeguard the public trust, and then to improve the knowledge of planning and public's understanding of our work. The rules of conduct under which you can be charged with a violation are organized into 7 sections, dealing with the quality, integrity of practice, conflicts of interest. And the conflict of interest stuff comes up a lot. Improper influence, abusive position, honesty and fair dealing, your responsibility to your employer, discrimination and harassment, and there is a definition section for you within the code that helps to define the meaning of these terms in terms of the Code of Ethics, and then your responsibilities if you bring a charge and to cooperate if there is a charge brought and you are a party with knowledge. The last slide highlights a revision made to the code. We allow non-professional planners to bring to our attention possible violations of the Code of Ethics. But a lot of these complaints are just citizens who are angry with a decision made by the planner. And we have modified recently the code so that if you want to appeal a decision dismissing a charge, against a planner, that appeal can only be made by an AICP planner who could choose to make that appeal on behalf of a group of citizens. I think this is important if you're doing your job right. I know I had an ethics charge filed against me for supporting an affordable senior housing project, and the basis of the complaint was the language in requiring us to get citizen engagement in the process. And the citizens said they all showed up and complained and said they didn't want the project. Therefore, I was unethical for supporting the project. So you have to figure out how to work through these issues. That's
Okay,
the
so
end.
yeah, so now it's my turn. Just to build on that last slide that Carol described, it may come as a shock that there are frivolous complaints that are filed against AICP planners. And I will note that that's probably my favorite provision of the recent update to the code a few years ago. So this is a fairly complex looking flowchart of the ethics complaint process, but I'm going to quickly go through this over the next couple of slides so that you get a flavor for how we deal with any complaints that are filed. There is an online form that you can find on the ethics webpage. That online form, when it's submitted, goes directly to me. So we have 4 general parties involved in an ethics complaint. The complainant is the individual who files the complaint. The respondent is the certified planner against whom the complaint has been filed. As AICP Ethics Officer, I really only have jurisdiction over AICP planners. So when a complaint is filed, we first verify whether or not the respondent is in fact a member in good standing of AICP. And if not, then the complaint has to be dismissed. As AICP Ethics Officer, I'm in charge of conducting the investigation. There is a person that is working with me to help with conducting interviews and doing the initial review of the complaint to help speed up the process. And then there's the AICP Ethics Committee, a 9-member committee, 4 of whom are on this call webinar with us. And when an appeal is filed, it's the decision's basically taken out of my hands and is then the responsibility of the Ethics Committee. So when a complaint is filed, I conduct a preliminary review. I can either dismiss the charge at that point, or on the basis of an investigation, I may determine that there is a potential violation. I send a preliminary determination to the respondent, which gives the respondent an opportunity to review the information that's been submitted and to provide a response to me as to whether or not they think the charge is valid. So that's all part of the fact gathering process. We do interview people, we interview witnesses as well. And then based on all of that, I make a decision as to whether or not an ethics violation has occurred. There are basically 4 options for me in terms of discipline. One is a confidential letter of admonition, so it's basically between me and the respondent. There's a public letter of admonition, in which case we try to use that matter as an educational tool, and we may publish a blog post. More often than not, that is anonymous, but sometimes we will also publish the name of the respondent. In more serious cases, I can either suspend for a number of years the AICP certification, or the harshest form of discipline at my disposal is full revocation of the membership to AICP. And we've discussed the appeal process, so AICP members can file an appeal, at which point it's reviewed by the Ethics Committee, and they can either uphold my decision or issue a one. Next slide. So these are just some footnotes related to the flow chart. So there's no need to go into all of this in any detail right now. So every year I'm responsible for submitting an annual report in January. So the next few slides summarize the annual report that I submitted in January 25 to review my activities in the year 2024. So I get about 100 inquiries for informal advice every year. Sometimes it's a little bit more. This year, I think it's going to be tracking to be a little bit more, maybe about 10 a month. There's a phone number that's on the ethics webpage, and that phone message goes directly to a voicemail, which is sent to me as an email, and then I follow up and schedule a time to give you that informal advice, which is only done on the phone. Last year, I received 29 new complaints, and during the course of the year, I was handling about 45 cases, including ongoing cases from the year before. And you can see the breakdown that they were in various stages of review. I dismissed 17 and 11 cases were resolved. So I issued a couple of preliminary determinations. These two matters have since been resolved this year. One involved the failure to report a revocation of a state-issued broker's license. You can see the rules that were in play for this particular matter. In this particular case, the charges were upheld. So as it turns out, the individual involved retired, and he has given up his AICP. The second one involved inappropriate conduct in the workplace that created a hostile work environment. The planning director engaged in improper behavior. So at that point, I issued a preliminary determination that there was a violation that was upheld, and this individual's credentials were suspended for a few years. With the cases that were resolved, 7 of them involved cease and desist letters for the misuse of the AICP credential. We take that very seriously. So if an individual is still using AICP but has not paid their dues, has not maintained their CM credits, they are not members in good standing of AICP, and we issue cease and desist letters. And then the next 4 cases involve appeals that were heard by the Ethics Committee. In one case, they upheld a letter of admonition to a planning consultant who made inappropriate characterizations about planning projects for indigenous populations during a presentation at the National Planning Conference in 2023. They upheld the dismissal of a complaint involving numerous code violations that were alleged relating to the competence of a planning director. They vacated a decision where I issued a letter of admonition to a chapter president for comments made at an APA-sponsored event, and they upheld the dismissal of a complaint involving alleged conflict of interest. Slide. So we also break it down by topic areas. This is the number of calls and complaints that involve these various categories. Don't try and add them up and reconcile them with the numbers in the first slide, because a lot of calls and a lot of complaints involve more than one rule or aspirational principle. So this just shows you the general trend, and seems to hold up every year, that the top three, quality and integrity, responsibility to employer, and conflict of interest, tend to be the most common topics. But I also get a lot of miscellaneous calls for assistance as well. And we also break it out by geography. So you can see that there were a number of calls involving some of the states in the Mid-Atlantic region. And now I turn it over to Arlova.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name's Arlova Baum. Tuning in from Arlington, Virginia, and I live in DC, so I'm technically a member of 2 chapters that are part of the collaborative. This and the next few slides highlight the values of AICP as it relates to equity and social justice principles by giving examples of what each principle means. So equity, unfortunately, has become a bit of a bad word in certain circles, particularly in the workplace, but it remains in the Code of Ethics. And as you can see with this slide, very explicitly referenced. So the next couple are examples, good and bad, of how that looks in our planning practice. So understandably, if you want to practice as an ethical planner, if you aspire to, as evidenced in our principles, you have to start with yourself and examining what biases you might be bringing to the table. So this principle encourages planners to look at how they work, to understand what unconscious and conscious biases they have so that they can better engage with the public in a way that promotes a sense of belonging. And there are lots of free tools if you want to do a self-assessment to help you in this journey. Next slide. This is not a not good example. So the map on the screen is a redlining map. These were produced by the Homeowners Loan Corporation many years ago, using colors to indicate levels of risk for people making investments and loans. So green areas are considered low risk and red areas considered high risk. And the distinction was the number of African-American people living in those areas, despite whether they were solid middle-class neighborhoods. And so this is created patterns of inequality that still exist. And so this aspirational principle talks about our responsibility to eliminate such things moving forward in our planning policies in land use regulations. And that was Denver, but a lot of communities all over the country have similar maps. This is an example of the principle talks about our special responsibility to work with those who've been marginalized. And the image is for an award-winning comprehensive plan for Newark, New Jersey, Newark 360, Shaping Our City Together. And the plan's goals were to accommodate growth while maintaining community integrity, inclusivity, and resiliency, and recognizing that need to include voices that historically had not been part of the planning process. The team conducting this plan translated materials into Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole to ensure that all the residents of Newark could participate in the process. So that's an example of how it's being done well. This is a picture of a road that actually doesn't go anywhere. It's US 40 in Baltimore, a highway that was constructed before the whole route was approved in West Baltimore, resulting in a fragmented road network and dividing this neighborhood into 2, which then led to civic disinterest and lack of investment and neglect. So it was a bad decision that destroyed a community. And then on top of that, the road was never completed and doesn't actually function as a way to get people places. And the aspirational principle cited here talks about planners needing to mitigate the impacts of poorer planning decisions that resulted in patterns of injustice like evidenced here. And lastly, you may not be aware, but there is a specific aspirational principle that talks about promoting the rights of indigenous people and cultures. The image references the Lummi Nation found in Washington State. And in that state, local jurisdictions are required to work with tribes to coordinate urban growth. This involves working with them to consider how to approach tribal engagement in a culturally appropriate manner, learning about neighborhood tribes through research, talking to mutual contacts, and visits to cultural heritage centers. So taking the extra effort if the community that you work in has indigenous people and following kind of their means of engagement to include them in the process. The next several scenarios were based on complaints that were actually received. So real life situations, and the members of the panel are each going to take one, go through, talk about the situation, highlight either aspirational principles or rules of conduct that apply, and we won't leave you hanging. We will actually tell you what happened in the end and how they were resolved.
I think this one's mine. Real life scenario dealing with ex parte contacts. And I will tell you that in my practice with cities throughout my career, when I advise planning commissions and staff, I always say, wait, stop, don't take part in ex parte contacts. Now, your rules in your jurisdiction may vary, but let's first walk through this this scenario. So we've got a development for Elmer Woods for a PUD application, mixed use project, coming into, you know, a well-established neighborhood. I'm sure you all have heard a variation of that one before. Neighborhood group is up in arms about this mixed use development. They hire an attorney to represent their views, Ruth. Edith, who is an AICP member, is the principal planner with the city's planning department. She receives an email from the attorney, Ruth, who's representing the neighborhood, with a proposed redesign plan prior to the scheduled public meeting about the project. Applicant for Elmer Woods is not aware of this proposed redesign and has not approved any changes that are being offered or suggested by Ruth and the neighborhood group. So Edith says, well, great, what do I do with this brand new plan? And she calls the ethics officer for his advice. So how do you all think Edith should respond to Ruth? Remember, Edith is AICP. Should she simply acknowledge the plans submitted by Ruth, respond to a request for a meeting with Ruth, or do nothing at this point? I don't know. Do we have folks responding in the chat? Are we just going on? I'm seeing a couple come in, just saying acknowledge the plans. What I'm seeing so far, that seems to be the answer. That is probably what I would do. I would recommend if I were the city's attorney. You don't probably want to ignore things. You can certainly respond to a request for meeting by saying, you know, come to our regular open meeting, because otherwise it's an ex parte meeting. So next slide. Pretty consistently, everybody's saying number one. So what should Edith next do regarding the applicant, Elmer Woods? So we've taken care of Ruth. What should we do with the applicant for Elmer Woods prior to the public meeting and board review? Inform the applicant that a redesign has been proposed, request a meeting with the applicant, agree to a meeting only if the applicant requests one, or do nothing at this point. Okay. I'm seeing a bigger variety. One, there's a couple of threes. Agree if the applicant requests it. 4, I'm seeing some 4s, do nothing. So the answer to this may depend on your local practice with applicants and how you respond to or handle them with an application. So these are the principles. It's about safeguarding the public trust. So 4A and 4B guide us to deal fairly with all participants in the planning process and to not let any official action be influenced by personal relationships. Next slide. And then the ethical issues and the rules of conduct on improper influence. So when you're a public employee or a public official, not to engage in private communications if the discussions relate to a matter over which we have the authority to make a binding final determination, or with any decision makers in the planning process in any manner prohibited by law or agency rules, procedures, or customs. Again, this can be specific to your particular jurisdiction here. So in this case, the ethics officer advised Edith to not respond to the attorney or anyone from the neighborhood regarding the alternative proposal, but just simply treating it as a general public comment that was received, and allow Ruth to make that presentation herself at the public meeting. And he acknowledges we could contact the applicant to make them aware, but not engage them. And I, especially as a city attorney, love the last part. Let the city attorney know, call your city attorney, they're on your side, and don't have direct contact with an outside attorney without the city attorney present. So
Right, and
that's how.
I agree, Kim. I think that's great advice. If you as a planner are contacted by an attorney, I think the first thing you want to think of is exactly that. Get on the phone
Call
with
your
your
lawyer.
attorney,
Yeah.
you know, and make
Yeah.
sure, you know, everything is on the up and up. So great
Yeah.
suggestion.
Okay, and I think so. These are the considerations behind this, and looking at definitions. One of the great things about in the rewrite of the ethics code is that we have now um, uh, a glossary of terms. So it's important to understand what ex parte communication means. I think every state now in the country has Public Information Act and an Open Meetings Act. And so all of those decisions and discussions by public bodies and officials should be based on the same information presented in public with a discussion open to the public. No one should have a special advantage or access to the decision makers. Only personnel and sensitive information can be shared in executive session. And then bear in mind, this really is state specific and sometimes very locally specific, because your state or county may have additional ethics rules regarding communication with outside entities. So be sure you're aware of that. And again, don't be afraid to call your attorney. And now I think I'm handing it back over to Ralph.
Correct. And just to add to Kim's last comment, when I'm giving informal advice, I frequently have to remind people that there may be state ethics codes or more local, county or municipal codes that apply. So I can tell you what my advice would be vis-a-vis the AICP Code of Ethics, but I'm not specifically aware of all of the other codes that might apply within your own jurisdiction. So it's important to make sure that you check to see whether or not there are any applicable provisions in either state, county, or municipal ethics codes or commission rulings or whatever. So this next scenario involves a complaint that I received last year. The city of Shupeville was reviewing a zoning change relating to a permit review for a residential development. And one of the key issues there was how the zoning change required the set aside of open space for new developments. And there were some questions about how that open space was to be defined and set aside as part of the proposed development. So the city engaged Donald AICP from the planning firm Free Parking Planning to review the project. But the city also reached out to the regional planning agency to get an opinion from them as well. And they hired Curran. So at issue was whether or not the open space requirement could be met if it was on private property, and whether it was accessible to just the residents or available to the public at large. So Curran from the Regional Planning Agency reported to the city that the developer's proposal would not meet the open space requirement in the subdivision code because the way it was proposed, it would not be available to be accessible to the general public. But during a hearing of the Planning Commission, Donald allegedly testified that Curran had changed his opinion on whether or not the open space requirement was met. So a planning commissioner thought that in saying so, Donald misrepresented Curran's testimony when he stated that Curran had changed his mind about the open space requirement. And then she filed an ethics complaint against Donald for misrepresentation of the information. So what's really going on here? Did Curran really change his mind about the open space requirement? Did Donald misrepresent that opinion in his testimony to the Planning Commission? And why was the charge brought against Donald and not against Curran if in fact he did change his mind? So first question here is, if Donald was sure that Curran changed his position on the acceptability of the open space, did he act ethically when he accused Curran of changing his position, as noted by Carol? We're seeing a lot of need more information, which is not necessarily surprising because there's only so much information we can provide here without spending hours on each different scenario. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And if Curran actually did change his position from stating that the open space met the criteria to not meeting the criteria, is that ethical? Yes, no, or need more information? And again, it looks like people are feeling that more information is needed. And obviously I had all of this information in front of me. So when I looked at this, the aspirational principles that came into play were to provide timely, adequate, accurate information to all parties. This is also reflected in one of our rules of conduct. And also to exercise fair, honest, and informed professional judgment. In terms of the rules of conduct, we shall not direct or pressure other professionals to reach findings not supported by the available evidence, and we shall not deliberately misrepresent the qualifications, views, and findings of other professionals. So it was really Rule 14 that the complainant cited when I received the complaint. So in terms of the outcome, it did require a fair amount of digging, and I needed to get some additional information from all parties. So ultimately, I wound up dismissing the complaint because initially the reading of the transcript from the hearing seemed to indicate that the allegation was valid, but the complainant also acknowledged that Curran's report was not definitive. And all parties agreed that the definition of open space in this particular ordinance was very ambiguous and subject to a lot of different interpretation. So when Curran did the review of the transcript, he indicated that he did not think that the testimony was misrepresented by the city's consultant, Donald. So based on that interpretation and the fact that I reached out to all the parties involved, I dismissed the complaint because, in part, because of the ambiguities in the ordinance itself, and the lack of the ambiguities in the testimony. So several lessons to be learned. We have to make sure that we listen to what people are saying in a hearing process very carefully. We need to endeavor to write our opinions down clearly, make sure that your position is definitive. Talk to your colleagues if you think that they may have changed their determination of an issue. It's best to try and do that up front so that we don't have to deal with it after the fact during a complaint process. And if you need to switch your position, don't do so without documenting the rationale and communicating it with your colleague. And ensure that your codes are clear. This is easier said than done. But in this case, what constituted acceptable open space should have been better defined and less ambiguous. So scenario 3.
I'm up. So scenario 3 is about a private sector planner. And as shown in the screen, this is Daniel, who is an AICP planner, who is a lead consultant working on a comp plan for the town of Burnhamville. And the consulting firm has a sub-consultant, Lakeshore Engineering, that's working on the transportation element of the plan. And while working on the project, Daniel discovers that their sub has also been retained to do an analysis for a private developer who's looking to develop a large commercial property in the same town that they're doing the comp plan for. Understandably, Daniel is concerned about having the same consultant provide an analysis to inform the overall comprehensive plan transportation element, while at the same time helping design transportation facility for commercial property. And the issue being that the firm is directly working on policy for the same town that could, favorably impact the client that they're working on the commercial development project for. So Daniel called the ethics officer to ask for some informal advice about what to do. So our first question is, what should Daniel do once he learns that the sub-consultant is kind of double dipping here, working on the comp plan and working for a developer to do a property in the same jurisdiction? So yes, everyone, or most of what I'm seeing is tell your supervisor, for sure. Perhaps a combination of a couple of these might be appropriate. I guess the supervisor probably has the position to fire. Maybe Daniel isn't empowered with that ability, but 2, 3, or 2 and 3 seem popular choices. Certainly something should be done, not nothing. The second question is Daniel and his consulting firm at fault here? Not surprisingly, people want a little more information before jumping to that conclusion about how much, I guess, information Daniel had or didn't have at the time, perhaps, of selecting the sub-consultant, or some feel like that's not maybe his fault. So some aspirational principles that are relevant. Certainly, many of these come down to safeguarding the public trust and exercising good judgment and the conflict of interest or even the appearance of conflict of interest in accepting work, and being sure to disclose anything relevant to the public in your work. The rule of conduct that we found to be relevant is not performing work if there's a possibility of financial gain unless there's full disclosure and consent, and that is shared very clearly and transparently with the public. So the real life outcome is that the ethics officer agreed that there is a potential for a conflict of interest, and they were advised to either find another sub-consultant or request that the developer hire a different firm to work on their commercial project, and felt that the transportation consulting company should have conducted an internal review before agreeing to both projects. I think that's it for this one.
I'll jump in and add on that last one. It's always wise if you're in the private consulting realm, you should be doing conflicts checks because this could get caught. Lawyers are well familiar with that. So, you know, you always want to be able to figure that out ahead of time.
All right. This is our fourth scenario. It's dealing with the abuse of power. Patricia is a staff planner for the hamlet of Hudville and worked on its growth management plan. I know it seems like an oxymoron, you're a hamlet, but you've got a growth management plan and all this fancy zoning. A developer asks for a change in the land designation for a parcel owned by the developer. The Hudville Planning Commission denied the request. Oh, I guess, and Patricia was not involved. So a relative of Patricia's neighbor is the new developer, same parcel. The relative comes to Patricia and asks for some help, definitely outside of the planning process. Patricia's looking at everything and doesn't see how any circumstances have changed enough to warrant approval. So Patricia goes ahead and contacts the ethics officer for advice on how to proceed. So get your typing fingers ready. Should Patricia's role in the planning department be a factor in responding to her neighbor's relative who is the new developer? Yes, no, or need more info? Okay, it's pretty uniform, yes. Let's go on to the next question. Can Patricia provide informal, and I'm air quotes informal, advice to the new developer prior to the filing of an application? Yes, no, need more information. Okay, so I got a couple of need more infos, but overwhelmingly the response, oh, now, all right, now it's getting more sophisticated, and dragging more issues in. So this is good because, you know, we condense the real world for purposes of training. Overwhelmingly, people said no. Some people said maybe yes, but only as to here's the process and here's how it works and here's how everybody who wants to go through the process is involved. So let's look at the ethical principles and what the advice was. The ethical principles involved first say, don't let any official action be influenced by personal relationships. And in this case, we've got a relative of the neighbor. Sounds personal. Avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict in accepting an assignment. So we've got two cautionary things within the aspirational principles, and then some conversation in the rules as well. The first is not performing work for a client if there's a possibility of financial gain. As public employees, not engaging in private communications with planning process participants if the discussions relate to a matter where we have authority. And 10, we shall not engage in private communications with decision makers in the planning process in any manner prohibited by law or rules or procedure. So here's what the advice outcome was. Patricia was cautioned about communications outside the planning process and to avoid discussions with either the developer or the neighbor's relative. Further, Ralph reminded Patricia that per the code, her primary responsibility is to her employer rather than trying to make her neighbor happy, even if it sours her relationship with the neighbor. And I want to comment on those people who said, well, just talk about the public process stuff. That approach gets incredibly sticky right away, because it is difficult in a conversation with someone to say, I'm answering these two questions. I can't answer that one. I can't discuss that one. It would be much better immediately to just hand that person off by saying, we get lots of very preliminary inquiries in the city. You need to talk with someone other than me. Here, our phone number is, you can call us during working hours and ask for, and you can name a couple of people on the staff or the one other person, depending on the size of the organization. Once you get involved with this person, once your name is in their mental Rolodex, you're going to get phone calls forever. And you lay out the possibility that in public kinds of settings, this applicant is going to say, well, when I was talking to Patricia, that was not the understanding that I had of how the process worked. So an initial instinct about, well, let me try to be helpful in this sort of a setting where there is even the appearance of a conflict of interest, that effort to be helpful could come back to bite you. So it is much cleaner to step away from having any kind of a relationship. All righty. These couple of folks are memorialized in our slides because their names were somehow used. And anybody who has taken the exam any time in the recent past, the AICP exam will recognize the history and the names of all of these individuals. And so Ralph picks different individuals every year to be recognized. And I'm still getting comments in the chat. But it only gives me the first 6 comments, and then I'd have to stop and open the whole chat. So I'm just going to keep going through the slides because we have some really exciting stuff still coming. Here's a reference to who is currently serving on the AICP Ethics Committee, and once again, how to contact Ralph for the formal ethics advice. And now your chance to compete for honor and glory and play Ethics Jeopardy.
Wow, no pressure there, Carol. Let's see.
Yeah, and again, this is going to be open book. So if you go to www.planning.org/ethics, you can get to some of the areas where you can either find the code and the provision, or the rule number, or what the rule is about. Most of the items, a lot of the items were discussed in the presentation earlier. So a number of these items you will get if you were paying attention earlier during the webinar.
So a couple of ground rules. We're using the chat, I believe, for you to provide answers, and I cannot look at the chat and run the board at the same time. If I were, because I am a Jeopardy watcher, I would be looking for in the form of a question, just saying, we're following the rules. And we're looking for the best answer. So a lot of these questions have multiple, like even in our examples, there's multiple rules of conduct, there's multiple principles, but what we're looking for is the very best one. And so when you're ready, use the chat to provide an answer. And then my colleagues will let me know if we've got it, and then we can move on to the next question. In real world conditions, we would be in a room and you could raise your hand and you could pick the different categories. We're online, so I'm just going to run through each one, starting with ethics potpourri all the way across to the principles in practice. And we'll see how much we can get done and test your knowledge. So without further delay, it's kind of a toss-up here. This is the place for all things AICP ethics. Get those answers in. I feel like this has been repeated a couple of times in this presentation.
We have some winners. What is
Okay.
ethics code? What is planning.org/ethics?
Correct.
Yep.
Many of you should probably have this up right now if you're playing along. So, next question. To maintain their AICP credential, a planner needs to log this many. How many credits?
I think this should have been only for 10 points. This is an easy one.
Everybody
So
says,
every
Whoa,
2
look at that.
years.
I think everybody knows this one.
Okay,
Yes.
I can move forward. 32. Okay, wonderful. Trying to get, okay, I have to move your faces to be able to see. Okay. 30 points, the number of cases or inquiries in 2024 from Pennsylvania. So were we paying attention to the map that was displayed earlier?
We got a correct answer already.
Okay.
First one.
I like the 100.
8, okay.
Too many. That
8
was
in
a good one, too.
Pennsylvania, 2024. Oh, if you're good at anagrams, you can find these at the local bakery, confection flitters. So what does that translate to that you might find in the ethics code? If you're good with letters.
We got some correct answers.
Yep,
Okay.
conflict of interest.
What is conflict of interest? Mentioned quite a bit. And lastly, in potpourri, this is the only body authorized to give a formal advisory opinion. There's a big clue in the panel itself.
Yep, and
I'm seeing it. Yep.
We've got some sharp folks, or they're paying attention to the website.
Got it. What is
Yes.
the ethics committee? Okay, cases of the year. We'll start with 10. We just discussed this. The ethics officer advised Edith to do what? With regard to responding to Ruth, the attorney representing the neighborhood group who submitted an unsolicited proposed redesign of the development proposal in advance of the scheduled public meeting. So what did the ethics officer advised Edith to do.
Yeah, and I love the folks who are typing it as a question. You know, it takes a little bit longer
Yes.
to type a
Yes.
question, but that is great.
Yes. So these might take a little longer because we're looking for the best answer.
Yeah, I
So,
think we've already had some
Yeah.
people respond correct.
Like the person from
Okay.
Texas responding, contact the city attorney. Way to go.
What is
Okay.
my phone was broken? That's
Yes. Don't respond to anyone about the alternative proposal. Okay.
No private
Next.
conversations.
Okay. Another ethics anagram. The cloud rises to a sunny afternoon. What might that be?
we have a correct answer.
Okay. What is disclosure? Very important. For 30 points, the ethics officer advised Edith to contact who, before talking to Ruth, the attorney representing the neighborhood group who submitted, is this a repeat?
She advised, yeah, to contact who?
Oh, okay, sorry, thank you. So who should Edith contact? Sorry. Before talking to Ruth. So same scenario, different question. Sorry about that.
We have some correct answers. What is the city attorney?
Got it.
What
Got it.
is?
Who
Good
is the
question.
city attorney? Yes. For 40 points, 2 rules of conduct were noted as potentially being violated by Edith. We would like one of them, if you can remember.
Right, and you can either give the number or you can give the gist of what the rule was about.
Sadly, I don't have the music handy.
Okay, we have someone who got both of them right.
Okay, an overachiever.
9 and 10.
Rule number 9 and rule number 10, about engaging in discussions outside of the process.
Sorry, we don't have any fabulous prizes to offer.
50 points. Yeah, you're keeping score for yourself because we are
Yeah.
certainly not keeping score.
And you can do whatever you want with the peg.
Exactly. It's pride of doing a great job. So in the he said, she said, they said scenario, the ethics officer dismissed the complaint for 2 reasons. Name them. I guess we need both of them.
Yeah, that's why this is a 50-point question. This is a tougher one. We're asking for
Yes.
2 answers instead of 1.
Think back.
Yeah, we're starting to get the correct answers now. The first few
Okay.
were not totally correct.
Okay, so the 2 issues were there was agreement that there were ambiguities in the testimony and the code did not have a clear definition of open space. So it was dismissed. Okay, these are about the Code of Ethics update that took place a few years back. So the first question is when did that happen? When did the update of the Code of Ethics take effect? Which should be easy to find if you're looking at it.
So a lot of these answers are correct. Technically, the revisions were complete in November 21, but they took effect in January of 22.
Got it. Got it. January 2022. For 20 points, foundational to our profession is to always do this, and it did not change with the new code. So no matter what you're doing or where you work, it's important to always do this.
We definitely have all of these answers posted so far are correct.
Are correct?
Yep.
Serve
Okay.
the public interest.
What is to protect the public interest? First principle, first aspirational principle. For 30 points, this member is required to cooperate with the ethics officer or the ethics committee if it is determined that they have information relevant to a charge filed against an AICP planner. So who is required to cooperate?
What is an AICP planner?
Correct. Rule number 21. And if I'm taking too long, I can only see my screen, so just tell me when to keep rolling. I can't see faces or anything. Okay, for 40 points, a greater focus and the overarching principle of the newly updated Code of Ethics. And our presentation today should be a clue for this one.
We have correct
Yep.
answers. What is
Correct
equity?
answers.
Okay, what is equity and social justice? Wonderful. And lastly, the only reason an AICP members can file an appeal of a determination by the ethics officer related to a complaint of misconduct.
Yep, there we go.
Yep.
Eliminate frivolous complaint.
Got it. Reduce the use of frivolous complaints by sadly members of the public against AICP members.
Yeah, and I continue to be amazed by how quickly folks are typing, especially in the form of a question. It's pretty impressive.
We appreciate it.
Bonus
Okay. Our rules of conduct for 10 points. Describe the most severe discipline that can be imposed under the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct for an AICP planner found to have violated the rules of conduct.
Revocation.
We've got it.
So in this instance, they were an AICP planner, so the worst thing would be revoke their AICP membership. For 20 points, a gift of tickets for a VIP tour of Camden Yards for the city planner and their family from a Baltimore real estate developer. What could be wrong with that? What might apply there?
I was not invited.
I like the bribe.
What is-
Conflict of interest.
Yes, compensation for a public official or public employee from someone other than our public employer. 30 points for rules of conduct. This shall not be used to our personal advantage. Which rule of conduct applies here?
And I'm seeing I
I
would
see
take
one or two correct answers, but most of them are not exactly correct.
Okay, so the best answer we believe is what is confidential information that you obtain in the course of your work, and the specific rule of conduct is provided there. For 40 points. Uh-oh. Shane hasn't logged any CM credits in 3 years, but still uses AICP in their signature.
yeah, bad Shane.
What is misstating education, experience, or training? And as we've heard, this is a fairly common thing that comes up through the year, people misusing the credential when they're no longer AICP members. Lastly, for 50 points in our rules of conduct, a full-time city planner, AICP, moonlights for a real estate office in the same jurisdiction, but has not told their supervisor. So what rule of conduct applies here?
A lot of people are saying conflict of interest, which may or may not apply, but this first thing has to be dealt with. And now we're starting to see some correct answers.
Getting close, okay.
Yeah.
So the specific one we're looking for is number 18, about not undertaking employment or related in planning or related field without making full disclosure and getting written permission from your
Sometimes
employer.
some of these things may be allowable if all parties agree through full written disclosure and written permission. So while yes, there may be a conflict of interest depending upon the circumstances, certain type of outside work may not be a conflict of interest. I get a lot of questions about that.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think Chuck put the whole rule in there, but it was not in the form of a question.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, last category, ethical principles in practice. Planners are employing authentic public engagement techniques in a community that was historically redlined to ensure all voices are heard and to expand choice. So we're looking for the principle that best is reflected by this. And these are the ones I find that there are multiple
Yeah,
ones
we're getting
that are relevant, but we're looking
right.
for the most specific one to this situation.
A couple of people have already gotten the correct.
Okay. So as we talked about this earlier, our responsibility to expand choice very directly and opportunity for all persons. For 20 points, maintain a website in multiple languages of the guiding principles for the development of the comprehensive plan, alternatives being considered, and schedule for public input. So putting relevant information about a planning process in multiple languages on the website. What principle does that embody?
Yeah, I'm starting to see a couple that are correct.
Okay. So this refers to our responsibility to provide timely, adequate, clear, accessible, and accurate information to everyone who might need to understand it. For 30 points, the planning director gives their staff the time off and reimburses all fees to attend NPC 26 in Detroit.
I want to
Boy,
work for them, right?
Don't
I
we
wanna work for that
wish?
channel.
Don't we wish? All of our leadership were bound by this aspirational principle.
Nice budget. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a couple of correct answers again.
Okay. So we have a responsibility to learn, right? This principle talks about enhancing our professional education and training, which is done by webinars like this for free. Or, you know, if you have the budget, attending the national conference, which next year will be in Detroit.
Yeah,
Maybe
Ralph,
next revision, we can include something about having a great boss. Yes.
yeah, right. Did you change the name? Who was that we all want to work for?
Okay, for 40 points, Catherine, who is an AICP planner, works in the small ski town where she lives in the Poconos and rents her basement room on Airbnb. She is then asked to develop guidelines for vacation rentals. And we're looking at principles here. That might be relevant.
Yep, a couple of correct answers.
Okay. So as we've talked about many times today, avoiding a conflict of interest or even the appearance of conflict of interest, was the relevant principle. Lastly, county planners are asked the nearby tribal council to participate in the planning process for a new housing development adjacent to their tribal lands. If you were paying attention, we talked about a similar topic earlier in our presentation.
Lots of correct answers here.
Okay. So this is about our responsibility to promote the inherent rights of Indigenous people and work with Indigenous peoples on developments affecting them and their lands and resources. So again, congrats to all who played and kept score for yourselves and personal bragging rights. I think I'm gonna stop sharing. Do we want to try the, I just realized I did not actually open Final Jeopardy, but if we.
Yeah. There are a couple of questions in the
Okay.
Q&A.
We can do
Yeah,
that.
why don't we just go to the questions? And I think we've got about 5 minutes left to wrap up.
Got it.
So one question is about B7 only applying to public officials. Is that correct? Who wants to take that one? Ralph, Carol?
The way it's written, it says, we shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than our public employer any compensation, et cetera, et cetera. But one can also expand that to reflect anyone. I get some questions about the behavior or actions of planning commission members who, are technically not, I don't have enforcement authority over anyone who's not AICP, but I have offered advice in situations where people that may not be subject to discipline per our code would still be guided by either the principles and or the rules of conduct. And a lot of them are pretty straightforward and logical and make sense. So even if the code doesn't necessarily explicitly call out a particular party as being responsible for meeting those standards, I think that it can be applied across the board. During my tenure as ethics officer over the last 3+ years, I have not run into a situation where this particular provision of the code has been alleged to have been violated by someone other than a public employee. But, I can see that it may come up at some point.
Okay. And we've got one more question, and then I think we're going to wrap up with a quick note from myself and then Jillian. Okay, the next question. One of my previous supervisors told me it was important to have a real conversation with potential developers on the likelihood of their application receiving approval and obstacles they are likely to face. Under the premise of informing them, they may spend a whole bunch of money for no gain. How does this fit in? So I guess they're wondering, hey, the supervisor told them they should have conversations with the developers as they're starting out in the process. How does this fit into the process with planning ethics?
I'll take a first crack and see if Kim or Carol or others may want to add to it. But a lot of communities have sort of pre-development informational meetings. Those are perfectly acceptable. I would only caution that, I think part of the questions talked about the likelihood of success. I would not go there. I would just simply explain what the process is, what the expectations are, what the informational requirements are per your local code, and provide that information and leave it up to the developer or the applicant, I should say, as to how they want to proceed and their expectations as to what the likelihood of or failure. Carol
Okay.
wants to add
Yeah.
something.
I would add to Ralph's a little bit. I do think we have a responsibility when a project has very little chance of success to let an applicant know that. But a very effective way to do that is to tell applicants a similar project was reviewed by the Planning Commission last year. It did not receive favorable consideration. Here's the link to the Planning Commission meeting. Watch for yourself and see what the issues are within our city. And then you can make an informed judgment about whether you want to proceed. I don't see anything wrong with giving a heads up to someone and saying, this is going to be difficult, which is different from saying, oh, hell's bells, this isn't going anywhere, don't waste your time.
Or that it's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
Yes,
Nothing
both of
is.
those, both of those, absolutely.
I'll just add, I never try to predict what an appointed or elected body will do with an application. So, yeah.
I kept a magic 8-ball on my desk, and when people asked, what is the Planning Commission going to do? I would lift up the magic 8-ball and give them the answer.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today and offering their perspectives on planning ethics. And I think this is the second time I've done Planning Jeopardy on a webinar, and actually I think it has worked fairly well. Doing it in the webinar style, you miss some of that interaction that you have in person, but I think it worked out really well. And thanks for everybody for chiming in. A lot of folks answered the questions that we had today. So thanks to all the participants as well. The next MAPC webinar will be in January on energy and planning, or big energy. And I'll turn it over to Jillian with some closing words.
Thanks, Scott, and everyone for joining us this afternoon, and to Arlova, Carol, Ralph, and Kimberly. I thoroughly enjoyed many of the comedic responses, and I hope that attendees found it informative, and both informative and fun. As I noted at the start of the presentation, a follow-up correspondence will go out to all attendees, which will include the link to the webinar recording and to the slide resources. And yep, Scott laid us up perfectly for the webinar in January, so stay tuned. We will not have a webinar in December, but keep your eyes peeled on your inboxes for updates as we get closer to the end of the year. And thank you, everybody, for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.